Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today's job is back out on the Porsche 924. I say today's job, this job actually has been years in the making. The reason being is it's because of these, the seat covers, the interior of my 924 is the last step on my journey to restoring the car to a good road going version, as I put in my description for the channel. This has kept me going back and forth for many years, because you can go full out restoration, full brand new interior, or you can try and sympathetically restore what you have. I think the route I've gone has been the best route, so it's going to be a bit of a long video, so I hope that you stick with me on the journey for this one. I've had a bit of help, but ultimately I've tried as much as possible to do most of the work myself, so we'll go through a lot of those steps throughout the video, and I'll do a lot of talking about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So yeah, I hope you stick around for this one. It's going to be a long one, but I think I've achieved what I set out to achieve, even with all of those years of thinking. So yeah, let's get onto the car and let's see what steps I go through. Okay everyone, so we have the seat here. As you can see, the backing cover is already in place. I didn't have to change that one because it's in very good condition. There's no splits or cracks. Vinyl's very good. I've done a decent clean, just need a few more touch-ups there just to bring it back to as best as possible condition, but overall very, very good considering it's 40 years old. And this is really what I wanted to try and achieve, was to save and rescue the original fabrics, the original seat covers as much as possible. So just to give you an example of what I was working with, these are the panels either side of the seat, as you can see, both very shiny, split occurred between the fabric and the vinyl. So of course, after many years of sitting in the seat, the split happened, which is very common actually on these seats, right down between the two types of material and where they join. So of course, when you look at replacing any type of upholstery and you go to any sort of professional outfit, they don't really want to spend too much time thinking about replacing individual panels. So you generally get into a conversation of they don't want to work on it unless you're replacing the whole thing, the whole cover, top and bottom. So you're into thousands of pounds to do that work. Equally, you can buy the covers yourself, which again can be anywhere depending on the material that you're looking for and the setup that you want, be it leather, vinyl, and so on. You can easily be up around £1,000. So plus doing all the work yourself as well, if you are going to do it without someone else fitting it for you. So I think this approach is something I wanted to be sympathetic with. I've thought long and hard about whether I change the interior, whether I look for different materials. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there might be an angle to try and rescue what I had and find a master seamstress is probably the best way to describe the person that helped me fix the seats and bring them to the current condition they're in. So these are the old parts or the old panels that came off. And as you can see, the new panels have been sewn in using a machine, which I don't have. So, you have to find someone who, one, is a master seamstress who's very comfortable with all sorts of materials and angles and so on, has the right needles, the right know-how of what type of stitch and so on to hold these materials together in the best possible way. So with any seat covers, as you know, as you might not know, you might know, it's a section of panels that generally are cuts that are brought together in various shapes. So someone who has the know-how of how all this stuff is put together and type of stitching and so on can look at this and say, right, we can save these panels and we can remove them and we can put in the right, potential stitching and so on to keep the fabric, which is what I wanted to keep in the middle, still going, if that makes sense. So what we've done is we've replaced those two outer panels with enough material sewn on the inside to give rigidity and strength again to the joins, and also on the side joins there where you see the piping in the same color. And I managed to find the same grained vinyl color, which is a grey beige. It's you can see it's slightly darker, very, very slightly, and that's because the original color has faded over the years with sunlight and UV and all of that good stuff. But without it being too distinct, once the covers sort of fitted in and sunlight's on the car and so on, it's very, very unnoticeable, if that makes sense, unless you really look for it. So I was really happy to find that material. Local supplier managed to have that in stock, so I bought some very inexpensive, again, sort of a meter by 135 centimeters, meter by meter square, was about £70 all in. So I ordered more than I needed because, as you think about these seats, there's various different flaps and panels as you put the seat back together, or the seat cover back together on the seat, I did think, is it worth replacing any of these? But actually, they're all in very, very good condition. So we've just gone for those two there. So anyway, that's enough sort of background, I guess, on the seats. And as you can see, what we've got to do now is fit this base cover to the base here. I've opted also to keep the original foam because it's all very, very good condition still. There's no what I would call sagging or parts that would really need replacing. You can buy the foam bases for about £120 all in, I believe. But these are in very good condition. This is the passenger seat, so this one's definitely the better of the two in terms of the material. We'll look at the driver's side in a moment, but we'll get on and start fixing this back together. And like with all of these seats, you can go for two options really. You can look at fastening the cover with cable ties. That's one way you could do it, or I'm voting for the sort of original way they did it, which was with the hog rings, with the hog ring pliers there. So sort of metal hoops that you fix around the areas that you want to sort of tighten in and lock in to lock everything in position. So we're going to work our way round. There's lots of little hooks here that the material fixes on. The interesting thing with my seats is at some point in the life of the car, this part of the seat, or the passenger side, found its way onto the driver's side. So when you look at the side here of the seat, the cover should actually cover these up, these metal plates and so on. But on mine it didn't, because they had swapped the base parts around. So at some point they were trying to get more wear, I guess, through material splitting and so on. So we're going to put the right seat back on the right side, make sure these are all covered up, and look as factory as possible, very similar to these parts here, as you can see, all nicely put together. On the driver's side, we've got a bit of a bigger job to do. We've got the base and the back to do. So the back is much more difficult because of all the inner wiring that you've got to really tie down to make sure that it pulls in on these bolsters and so on. But anyway, we'll get to that later on. So let's crack on and get this base plate done. Okay, so the base cover has been installed, and I'm sure some of you would have been scratching your heads, maybe screaming at the screen, saying, hey, what about the glue between the fabric, as in the seat cover, and the foam? And yes, I haven't forgot. What I wanted to do was actually test fit the actual cover itself to make sure, one, that it fits correctly in terms of sizing, because as I said before, we had to sort of judge what these panels might look like, because some of the panels had lost material. So it looks about right, which is great. But what you can see, you might not be able to see on the camera, is that there's a little bit of spring between the cover and the foam. And that's okay, because what we want to do now is, when you push the fabric against the foam and start to mold it a little bit into the sides, you'll get that final sort of seat shape that exists with the foam. And of course, they're not highly bolstered in terms of the seat base. The Tombstone seats, the sides are a bit more bolstered. They're not the sport seat, of course, which has much bigger, more prominent foam underneath, which gives you those bolsters. But there is a slight curve that we need to just glue into place and finalize, because that will hold the cover in place in a much better way. But to my point, and just to point out, oh, there goes the glue. The seat cover itself, as you can see, stretches onto these sort of hooks here. So I wanted to finalize the back part of the seat, which is here, because this is where you get a lot of the stretch. Once you've mounted it around these hooks, you get that stretch by pulling this part of the seat back and the corners in as well, which gets sort of the pressure required across the base. And what we will do now, because we've got those all locked in with the hog rings, I don't need to touch this part, but you can, with a little bit of pressure, just pull these hooks back up so they're straight and unhook the material, which allows us to peel back the front section and get the glue between the foam seat and the cover. And just talking about glue itself, which it ran off, here's the glue I'll be using. It's a heavy duty spray adhesive for carpets and upholstery and materials and so on. So there's a whole bunch out there that I'm sure people will suggest, from 3M to all other different makes. This one's worked quite well on some of the carpets I've put back in place in the car, so I'm going to run with this one and see how it goes. But that is the process we're going to tackle now: removing the cover, peeling it back, getting the glue down, and then pushing it all into place and then locking it back down. Okay, so that is now glued in place, and it's hard to see on camera because I don't know if it will give you the correct contours, but we've now got a nice sort of curve into the base, or back of the base here, where your backside sits. So it's a nice curve up that you might not be able to see on camera. You saw me with the heat gun there, just manipulating this side here where the glue, there was a slight split in the foam on this side of the seat base. So just with a bit of manipulation, I've managed to just ease it out slightly. It does feel more flat this side than it does on this side. And, you know, I could have gone with new seat bases, but they're still good enough. They're not, you know, they're not sort of in a state where it's going to be very uncomfortable without any type of padding. There's still a relatively good amount there that has filled the seat cover itself. So I'm pretty happy with that. I've, like I say, the bump really is just where the split, and I think that will move over time as people sort of sit in and out of it. I think the biggest challenge with anything with these seats, of course, they're like 40 years old, so some of the hooks that you feed the cover onto and lock into place, some of them have gone, and this is where you can use a little bit of cable tie technology and just get it in there and lock it in. The other thing is you could potentially weld these little hooks back in place. So I'm just going to hold on to them because when the time comes, I might do that. But otherwise, it's not causing any problems. The main thing now is that the seat is in place. It's glued. So there isn't that sort of movement of the seat cover necessarily when you sort of get in and out of the car, which is better for its endurance, I guess. And yeah, from that perspective, I think it's gone together really well. Now, what we have to do next is put the runners on. So on the base of the seat here, and then we'll get that screwed back into the car. But otherwise, that's the passenger seat done. So that was partly the easy side because the rear part of the seat I didn't have to touch. It's in really good condition, as you can see, bolsters and material-wise. On the driver's side, we've had to do a few sort of fixes, but we'll look at the material on that in a moment. But yeah, let's just finish off the runners on this. Okay, so we are now on to the driver's seat, and this is the back part of the seat and the seat cover that I removed. The reason why I removed this one is because it had a split which is above the stitch line. So it's a bit of a strange one really, because you would expect it to split on the actual stitch line itself, but it was just above. Anyway, we had some of this material. I managed to find a little bit of this material in spare, and the seamstress has kindly taken the foam out and stitched it behind to create what is a relatively strong, I guess, stitch above the actual stitching. And when that molds into the seat, it will be yeah, I mean, if you look closely, you'll see it, but otherwise, from afar, it will look just as decent as the one that we've just completed, which is great. So this, like the passenger side, has really fared quite well in when you think 40 years of, you know, sitting and sort of bouncing around as a driver's back seat. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the condition of it, and I didn't see a need to, you know, go down the route of getting a new one made. So we've rescued this one. We'll look at the base of the base cover in a moment, but this one's going to be quite a testing one. So the interesting thing about this is there is a sort of a groove that sits around the, I guess, sponge or foam, and the idea is that you follow the line of that on the inside, and you start at the top here where there is a sort of a rack or a bar that you can hook to, and then you follow the line down either side. Now you can see by the sort of rusty marks on each side where some of the previous hog rings were. So that helps us in terms of making sure we get this line locked in as tight as possible, so you get the bolsters as on the passenger side. But we're going to turn this inside out to start, because we've got to basically roll. I'll bring this back through. We've got to roll the cover down over the foam of the seat, sort of stage by stage. And as we work down, just manipulate it into position to get the best possible fit. And ideally a tight fit, because you want it to look as smart as possible. So I won't turn it completely, because that's where the top of the headrest goes, but you can see here that we have what is the very, very old 40-year-old wire that sits within the seat. So there's a sort of a wire frame, if we could call it that, that follows the curvature of that inner seat part that we want to fold right in deep. And the same on the other side. Where the material is sort of missing, that's where the hog rings were. So we sort of lock these into position. And we start with these right at the top, with the hooks at the bottom. So we're going to sort of follow this arc. And, previously I'm sure it was glued back in the day, because you've got this sort of material here, which was on top of the foam, which, has perished, of course, over time. I'll use probably a little bit of glue at the bottom just to fix it in, but depending on how tight we get this, we'll see. Hopefully it won't need any glue from that perspective. So yeah, this will be fun. I'll put a bit of music behind what I'm doing here, because I don't think my language will be too kind as I go through this, because I can imagine it's going to be a bit of a pain just trying to get this locked in. And actually you can see, I don't know if you can see on camera, there's some of the holes that existed from the previous way that it was done. So yeah, again, the foam itself is in great condition. There's no sort of big tears or rips in the actual, I would say, molded part of this. So it should come together quite nicely if I can just make sure that it sits in tight against all of the relevant parts. Okay, so let's crack on with this. Right, everyone, so this is the driver's seat, and that was fun. We've installed the rear part of the seat cover, and I think overall I'm pretty pleased with the way it's turned out. Of course, I think personally it's much easier because the cover has lived here before. So I think overall, when I was fitting the wire to the back of the seat and the framing and the springs there was a natural alignment that sort of occurred, which I guess helped me out a lot. Whether if these were brand new, how difficult that might be would probably be a bit more telling with the time taken. This one took me the best part of an hour, I think, to get it to a position where I'm comfortable with the cover, mounting the base part of the frame and seat together again. So that included the lift mechanism to tilt the seat or the back part of the seat forward and back, and also the rake and recline mechanism here. What's important about this part, which I sort of remembered later as I was fighting this, is there is a wire that comes from this part of the mechanism to the base plate, and it's held in by a very, very small sort of clip that the wire goes through, and then you sort of push almost like two parts together into a pyramid shape, and it stops the wire from going back through. So it's one of those sort of clips that if it stretches is very easy to lose, it slips off and so on. And when you fit it, you're sort of trying to hold it in position while you're threading through the wire mechanism. And of course you want that to be right at the bottom in terms of its position, because when you release it, it's about lifting it up. So you can hear that mechanism there working. When you do it, you have to bring the wire through the material or through the leatherette and over the mechanism in terms of the backing of the seat, because if you put it under, then of course the wire has nowhere to go. So I worked that out as I was putting the seat together, because I'd forgotten how, when I took it apart. But of course these things you learn on the way, so always remember the wire comes out through the material and then down to meet the clip, which is a part of the base of the seat unit. So two screws or two bolts there holding it. The cap clips off, and there's a mechanism again, sort of a clip that you move around with a screwdriver, which locks the button in place. I guess the other part of the seat is this big screw here, and it's very big in terms of a screwdriver. I used the widest one I could, because you don't want to really round that out as much. They tend to be pretty stiff, and if they've never been removed, it's 40 years of grime and dirt that has accumulated over time. So I gave it a little bit of oiling, and that has gone in place. And again, because these covers have been used, you sort of have reference points to where the material has sat in situ before, both with this mechanism and this mechanism. So that sort of helped me just line things up the best I could. But yeah, overall I'm really happy with the way the bolsters look. It looks smooth, there's nothing to there. I'll probably run a heat gun just to iron it out, but you can probably now make sort of a visual sense of the split that was there in place. And of course I wanted to save these covers, so there's a patch that sits behind this with a number of lines of sewing that have occurred, or stitching behind it, so it's never going to split again. There's that's for certain. But it of course to the eye, if you really look closely, you're going to see that split. If it's sat there in the car from a distance and you're looking through the window, it might not be so noticeable as it's sort of from that angle. So the next part now is the base part, and that has its own interesting marks. Of course, this one has seen better days in terms of the material because it's been the most, in terms of use, been sat on for the best part of 40 years. I've cleaned this up as best I can, so it's it's looking a bit what I call it's got those swell lines in it because of the materials, I guess, degrading over time. We've re-put some stitching across the seat as well because the original stitching had gone, so those lines are back in place. And again, there was a cut that occurred. How it occurred, it's almost like a sort of Stanley blade type slice that happened, and of course when someone's sitting on it constantly, the gap from where the cut was started getting wider and wider and wider. So again, piece of material same as this that sat behind it and then stitched in, and of course you can see that very visible to the eye, but the main thing is there's no split. And then, like the other parts of the other seat base, we have these brand new panels either side, so the material now sits nicely against that that new vinyl or grain vinyl, leatherette, whichever you want to call it. And we'll go through the same process as we did on the passenger seat. So getting this in place, stretching it to a position where I'm comfortable, the seat is locked in at the rear part, and then we'll undo the front and then just apply the glue and then lock it again in position and make sure it's flat. So okay, so that is the driver's seat complete. We have the back cover in place, the base cover in place. They've come together really nicely. I'm really happy with the results. I mean, bearing in mind that these two panels that we've replaced, the panels that we took off had lost a lot of material. And with it, without the exact measurements, it was a little bit of guesstimate in terms of how much additional material would be required to ensure, one, the seat cover wouldn't be saggy, but also not too tight. If I had one, I guess, view is that it might be slightly tight on this side, but I think I'm going to run with it and just see how it performs in terms of, butt on seat, stretching and so on. If it looks like it's stretching too much, then I'm probably going to take it back and we'll get a new panel on this side sewn in. The main thing is I've got spare material now, which is the right color, which is great. So we can adjust as we go along. And it's pretty simple to get this cover off once the seat's out. So this is definitely the easiest part. The back part is the more difficult. So from that perspective, I'm really, really happy. The cut here in the seat is not as visible, so that has worked out really well. The one on the base of the seat, which you might be able to see a bit more clearly there in the camera, is the one that really sticks out. And again, we've got material the same as this, same color behind it to cover that and give it a bit more durability, so it won't split any further, and the seat will have a bit more extended life in terms of the material. So the contours, I think, are as good as it's going to get, with the glue in place and everything. And as I say, I'll run with it and see how things go. But overall, bearing in mind that this has cost me the best part of, 200, 225, plus the material, which I got, extra of. So all in for about £300, I've managed to restore the original 40-year-old seat covers and the original seat material by having these new panels sewn in and tidying up where we, saw weakness in the material. So for £300, I've basically got two sort of relatively new seats that are going to endure a few years ahead, which is great. And as I said right at the beginning of this, you can go all out on new seats and material and all of that good stuff, and you can go into the thousands. I didn't want to go down that route just yet, and I think this is the best outcome for the price point. And also, working through the job myself in terms of taking covers off, looking at how all the fixings work, I opted in the end for the hog rings with the hog ring pliers. They can be a bit troublesome if you don't line everything up correctly, but once you've got the sort of angles right, I guess, and the ring itself sort of situated into the pliers, the idea is you hold everything as tightly as possible in place and then lock those pliers around it and squeeze as tight as possible, and the hog ring pointed ends will lock and pierce where they need to in terms of material, foam, and lock around the metal as required to hold everything in place. So they are very, very robust once you've got them in, but I can also see the argument for using cable ties, especially on sort of the back parts where you can get all the relevant pieces of the material together and then pull it with a good cable tie. I did have some heavy duty ones on standby, which are these ones, because ideally what you want is something that's going to pull and not damage the sort of teeth mechanism on the cable tie and lock in tight and not let go. So there is that option, and I'm sure many people have tried that as well. The hog rings work well for me on this particular job. So yeah, really, really pleased with the outcome, and we'll get these back in the car, and I'll give a final view of what everything looks like situated in the car. So everyone, we've done it. We've gone through the steps to synthetically restoring the original car seat covers that left the factory 40 years ago. I'm really happy with how it's turned out, and I have many years ahead, I think, of using those original seat covers without too much problem. The main part of the seats were the panels, and of course when these seat covers get made, they are all panels that get stitched together. Now, if you're in the trade and you're, doing full interior refits, you probably don't want to get, sort of tied down or bogged down with these little type of jobs. So it doesn't make sense for them. So you have to sort of find someone that is prepared to maybe, take the seat covers apart and then put a bit of effort into making new panels to then restitch in. So overall, I'm really happy with how it's turned out, and I hope it's helped anyone else that might be thinking or is deliberating between whether you go full restoration or part restoration to save what you might originally have in the car. So with that, thanks again for staying on this one. I know it's been a long video, but if you like this type of content, please do think about subscribing and following me on Instagram. And the next videos will be along very soon.